So over here in Blender, in our default scene, we have three things available. This might be a bit basic, but let's just cover them. We have a camera, we have a cube, and we have the first light here. We're just going to use this light to show the differences. But to do that, first of all, let's add in a quick plane here so we have something to visualize this on, right? All right, I'm also going to remove the camera just because we don't really need that at this point. Now, if we go into rendered view here with Z, you can see our light is doing its job and it's casting a shadow as well as creating nice highlights on our cube here. Now, initially I'm using cycles. So over here in the render properties, I'm using the render engine cycles. Now I could also use Eevee and that does change things a little bit. So to explain all of the light types, let's just use cycles. Now the light that's added by default is a point light, as you can see over here in the data properties. It's quite a strong light as well. And the point light is actually a spherical lamp. Now, that's kind of hard to see because it doesn't really show it that well. But if I enable some volumetrics that I just simply added, you can see that the light here is actually round in how it looks. This is the first lighting type within Blender. Now, each of the light types has several settings. First of all, we have our power here, which is just the general strength. Now, I could go on a tangent of how the power is not representative of how actual light bulbs have watts as well, but it doesn't really matter. My opinion on light, and I think it should be yours as well, is that lighting serves your image. It doesn't really matter if the color or power is something different. The most important thing is that the result that you're going for is there. So we're not going to go in all the technicalities of getting proper light, power, strengths, etc. All right, so the settings are color. First of all, we can change this to be any color that we want. Then we have power. Again, this is the strength of our light. By default, this is set to 1000, which is actually quite strong. Then we have a radius. The bigger the radius, the softer the shadow will be. As you can see, going really, really big here. At some point, it even intersects with our cube here. But yeah, as you can see, the bigger light will create way softer shadows. So that's another thing to take into consideration. You can also control certain light settings by right-clicking on the light within the 3D viewport and selecting Adjust Light Power or Adjust Light Radius to control both the strength or the radius of the light overall. Now, the other one is the max bounces, which is the maximum number of bounces that the light will contribute to the render. Now, personally, I never touch this setting. I think 1024 is fine. I'll just leave it at that. Next, we have cast shadow. Well, disabling this simply does what you expect. It disables the light casting shadows. It's one of those things that make 3D lights so much better than actual lamps where we have none of these luxuries. Next, we have multiple importance, which sort of helps with reducing noise in areas with sharp or glossy materials. Then we have shadow caustics, which is something we'll go into in a later video in this course. And finally, we have the ability to use nodes. Again, something we'll cover in a later lesson. For now, let's select our second light type, which is the sun lamp. Now, the sun lamp is there to mimic an actual sunlight. As you can see, the default strength of 1000 is actually way too strong. So something like 5 is usually a bit more normal. Now, the thing with the sun lamp is that you can't actually move it around. So with the point light, I was able to, if we reset our strength here, to move it around and, drag it in our scene and make it look different. With our sun lamp, however, we can't do that because the sun lamp is basically representing a sun, which is so incredibly huge and so far away from our Earth that no matter where I move it, the light will look the same, right? The only thing that we can do is rotate our sun. Now, sadly, this does not come with a free day and night cycle, but yeah, using the sun lamp is actually a good way for getting realistic sun or outdoor lighting in a scene. Next up, we have the spot lamp. Let me crank up the strength there again, which is exactly what you expect it to be. This is a spotlight type of lamp. Now, it has several different settings compared to the point light, notably the spot size, which is the general size of our spot lamp, and the blend, basically the transition between the edge of the spotlight and the underlying materials. Now, finally, within our default lamps, we have the area light. Now, the area light is basically a shaped light. So by default, it's set to square and it's a square size like this. Again, you can rotate it in any direction you want, changing the angle, and you can move it around obviously as you wish. Now, another thing you can do here is change the spread. Again, sort of creating that spotlight effect, although it is a little bit different. But this also has the option to change the shape. So for now, it's a square, for example, but we can also change it to a disc, an ellipse, or a rectangle, giving us the freedom to control the size of each of these as well. Now, area lights are actually my favorite type of light to light a scene, and all of these lights can be added through our Shift A or Add menu. So if we just Shift A, go to light, we can add each of these lights individually, like so. Add in a bunch more if we want to. All right, so those are the 4 main lamps within Blender. Now, these differ from the other ways to light a scene, and that's because Blender actually treats these as unique objects within its sort of software, and that means that all of these work in Eevee as well. So if I now go over to Eevee, you can see that all of the lights, they still do their thing just as they would have inside of Cycles. So that's really nice to see. Eevee still works. Having said that, the other options to light your scene don't all work in Eevee. So let's go back to Cycles here. Let's disable all of our lights, or let's just remove them altogether. And let's start lighting our scene. Now, you might have noticed that even without any lights in our scene, it isn't completely dark. And that's because we have world lighting. So by default, the world lighting is set to a grayish color, and you can change that to be white, for example. And as you can see, this sort of makes everything look a little bit whiter. Now, we can also make this a completely different color if we want to. But yeah, a color is one of the default ways to light our scene. By clicking this yellow dot here, we can change this to be a number of textures. Most common is to use a sky texture, for example. This will add in a Nishita sky texture by default, which is basically another sun lamp, but with the added benefit of having sort of an atmosphere around it as well. In here, we can change the sun size, we can change the sun intensity, we can change the overall intensity, we can change the sun elevation. Basically, the closer it gets to 0, the darker our horizon gets here. And we can, basically create a sunrise or sunset with this effect. We can also rotate it on the global Z-axis, have it rotate around. And this is basically our way to create a sky texture without having to use something called an HDRI, which is the next one that I'll explain. So we also have some different settings here like air, dust, and ozone. And there's generally just a bunch of stuff that you can do to create very realistic skies within Blender. That's number 5. Now, number 6, the before last method, is to use an environment texture. If we do that, immediately the entire scene goes pink, which means that currently Blender is looking for a texture but can't seem to find it. If we press on open here, we can go to any HDRI that we might have available to us and use that in our scene. Now, you can find HDRIs on the internet everywhere, but the main go-to website that I use is polyhaven.com, which has tons of extremely high quality HDRIs, like basically all of the ones that I have here as well, which you can just download for free. You can donate to them if you want to, but you don't have to. They are completely free, and they range from like 1K to 16K quality. So that's crazy good. If you add an HDRI, like for example, this one, Cannery Wharf, at that point, we now have lighting in our scene, and we have the 3D image around us entirely. HDRI stands for High Dynamic Range Image, which means that we can control the look and strength without clipping too fast, because it has sort of a high dynamic range of data, which we can use to light a scene. And that's a great way to add in realistic lighting for outdoor shots, or to combine with other indoor stuff as well, regular lights, basically using a bunch of these. The final light that we have is something completely different. Let me just remove our HDRI here. And the final thing that we can do is something that doesn't really work within Eevee, and that is to use an emissive material. So if we take our cube here, which has a default material, and we go into emission, which is down here, and we set the strength to be 5, for example, our cube becomes a glowing white cube. We can change the color again, like it was a regular light. And as you can see, this does light up our scene properly in Cycles. But if I switch over to Eevee, immediately you'll notice that even though the cube does look kind of like it's emitting light, it does not affect the rest of our scene, which there is actually a solution for since this version of Blender 4.2. So with 4.2, Eevee actually got an update allowing ray tracing within Eevee. Now, ray tracing It's quite complex to explain, but basically it means that the camera fires rays at your image and these rays sort of come back and it uses that data to generate where shadow, light, or color should be. Anyways, by enabling ray tracing, and we'll go into the settings for that in a different video, you can see that our emissive light is now actually emitting light. It's not as good as it would be in cycles. As you can see, it's all around here, and in Eevee, it's just around here, but at least it's way better than what we had before. So now you know the 7 types of light within Blender. Let's dive into some of the differences between lighting in cycles and in Eevee.